So this week, we are going to continue with our look at various applications of game theory. And in particular, we are going to see how game theory provides a useful tool to think about networks and the platform economy, right? So key features of the information economy. And just to get started, to have some motivation, let's think about the following three choice problems. And when you are thinking about these three choice problems, think about what are the differences between these three problems, right? So the first problem involves choosing between WhatsApp or Telegram as a messaging app. The second problem involves thinking about Mac OS versus Windows as operating system to use. And the third problem involves thinking about whether to go to the market to buy potatoes or onion, right? So it would seem on surface that these are kind of like very different problems, right? But later on, we'll try and see actually what are the kind of like the different aspects of this problem. So for example, when you're choosing between WhatsApp or Telegram, you're not really thinking about what is the price of purchasing these apps, right? Because you can pretty much get to download these apps for free. So there, perhaps the important consideration is thinking about among the set of people you want to communicate with, who are the set of people who are going to be on WhatsApp or Telegram. So if more people that you want to communicate with, probably you would want to kind of devote more time to WhatsApp than on Telegram. But if it's the reverse, that the kind of like the people that you want to daily communicate with, they are on Telegram, then you would probably prefer to use Telegram, right? Again, when you're thinking about a choice between Mac OS or a Windows operating system, so here perhaps price becomes one of the kind of features that you might want to think about, because typically one operating system might be more expensive compared to the others, especially when you combine it with the hardware on which the operating system is used. But another feature that is going to be important is that you typically want to be on the operating system which has the maximum number of software that you are interested in using, right? So for example, one particular system may have the software related to your particular profession. They might be more available in one system versus the other, right? So there, then you're thinking about, okay, which system probably has more of what you require. Whereas in the third choice between potatoes and onion, you're probably not concerned about any of these issues, right? You probably go to the market, probably price is the most important thing, and of course your taste, but your taste kind of is there in other systems as well, right? So we want to kind of systematically think about these differences, right? And what we want to think about is that there are plenty of goods where you care about other people's choices, right? You might care about who are the other consumers of the good, right? So that is the WhatsApp versus the Telegram example. So when you're deciding perhaps which messaging app to kind of more focus on, then you are thinking who are the other consumers of WhatsApp or of Telegram, right? And whereas in the second case between macOS and the Windows example, you are probably thinking about other people's choices in the sense that you are going to be thinking about who are the producers who are going to produce these complementary goods, which are different softwares that you can use on these two operating systems, right? So what that tells you is that sometimes the benefits of using the Surface comes from two sources. One is the ability to interact with other users, and secondly, the additional features that can be used with the various applications, right? So these are basically the main idea behind network effects, right? So the basic idea is the following, that other things being equal, it's actually better to be connected to a bigger network because of these different reasons that we talked about, right? And a more precise definition is as follows. We are going to say that a product exhibits network effects if each user's payoff in using a particular item is increasing in the number of other users of that product or of products compatible with it, right? So this is the definition of network effects that we are going to work with. And later on, as you will see, we'll develop the mathematical modeling of this effect. And we are going to see that what are the various implications of this for different industries where these network effects are widespread. So typically network effects are observed in two types of markets, right? So they may be network or communication markets, or they may be system markets, right? So network and communication markets, the first example you can think of as the instant messaging app example that we talked about, right? So there, the benefit of the consumers comes from the ability to communicate via other customers via the network, right? And these are basically known as the direct network effects, where basically the more the number of agents you have in the network, then there are more communication opportunities, and therefore there are more incentives to join the network, right? And this example actually predates the rise of the internet as well, right? So you can think of this sort of effects being exhibited when you're talking about phones, right? So if you have a phone, but none of your friends or the persons with whom we want to communicate with have phones, then there's no point of you having a phone, right? I mean, if you want to kind of like think about communicating them. So think about landlines in the 1990s, for example, right? Similarly, if you have a fax machine, but none of the people to whom you want to send the fax, they have they do not have any fax machines, then again, there's no point on you only having fax machines, right? So suppose you are the only person who uses email, none of your friends uses email. So then again, in terms of communicating with your friends, emails are not of much use. In fact, this kind of like also outdates all of these telecommunication examples as well, right? So think about languages. That's also an effect where you kind of like have a direct network effect coming from, because imagine that you know a language and only you know that language, right? Then it's not of much use to you because you cannot use that language to communicate, right? So the more kind of people who are using that language, the greater benefit you have from actually knowing that language, right? So again, the same kind of like effects playing out. So these are basically examples of network or communication markets. The second type of place where the network effects are actually kind of to be seen are what are known as system markets, right? So again, think about the operating system example. So there you have got basically products which are obtained by combining components in a complementary way, right? So you have got the Mac OS software system, but that is built around the Mac hardware system as well, right? So the MacBook Airs, the iPhones, the iPads that you see. Whereas the Windows OS system is built around a different set of hardware, right? So there, basically, you have a sort of indirect network effect operating, where basically you find that the more the users of the system, there is more incentive for developers to write applications or software for the system. And the higher the number of developers who are kind of writing these applications, that means that there's going to be more incentives for users to buy the system, right? So you have this basically loop or circular effect playing out, right? And again, apart from operating systems, you can see this in video game consoles as well, right? So imagine that you are thinking of whether to buy PlayStation or Xbox. So there you would basically find that your decision of which basically video game console to buy is probably going to be affected by how many games are being released on that video game console, right? So that is one important feature. Similarly, on tablets and smartphones, so basically you are going to be using that operating system where you have more basically apps that you are interested in, right? And more the number of people who use a particular video game console, tablets or smartphones, there is more incentive for people to write particularly apps or develop games which are specific to those consoles. And therefore, the higher the number of such developers, then there's going to be more incentive for the users to buy those systems, right? So another term that one often hears in this information economy context related to network effects, which is somewhat similar but not exactly the same, is this idea of switching costs, right? So here the main idea is the fact that buyers often have to bear costs when they switch from one product to a functionally identical product supplied by another firm or another system, right? So again, think about this example of you deciding to switch from a Mac OS system to a Windows system, right? So there you have basically got switching costs coming from the fact that whenever you have kind of like initially started out, you actually made some investments which were specific to kind of like one particular system, right? So this may be physical investment. So think about you had to buy the system on which the Mac OS was working. So perhaps you had to buy a MacBook in terms of laptop, or a phone, you had to buy an iPhone. And then if you want to switch to a Windows system, probably you'll have to kind of like change the physical items on which you are using, right? So probably you'd have to use a thing on which Windows software works much better, or you would have to use Android system and so on, right? Whereas there might also be informational investment. So what does that mean? So imagine that you're kind of like using the Mac OS system. So then you have to kind of like learn how the different Mac OS system components play out, right? When you are switching to a Windows system or Android system, then you have to kind of like again make some investment in terms of learning how the Windows operating system or the Android system works, right? So you have got this both set of investments that you have to make. And as a result of all this switching costs, basically we see that consumers value compatibility between his or her purchases, right? So you want to kind of like take advantage of the same investment that you made in a particular operating system, right? So you would often see that somebody who has a MacBook as a laptop is more likely to be using an iPhone, whereas somebody who has a Windows system may more likely be using an Android system, right? So I'm not saying everybody does it, but I'm saying you're more likely to see it, right? And we'll see that as a result of this switching costs, you have basically a lock-in effect that is operating, and that leads to market power to producers, right? So that means basically it allows the producers to raise price compared to cost, right? So this is something that we'll be seeing. In contrast, network effects are basically situations where you have got consumers where they value compatibility not with their necessarily their past investments, but with what the other consumers are purchasing, right? So again, think of the example of the ability to communicate with other users, or the ability to take advantage of the same components, right? And we are going to see here, through again developing mathematical models, that expectations are going to play a crucial role, right? So when you are buying, for example, operating system, it does not come with kind of like, the guarantee from the manufacturer that, in the future, certain softwares are going to be developed by third parties to use in this operating system, right? So here, what is your expectation about what are the type of softwares that is going to be available on this platform is going to be important determinant when you're thinking of buying into a particular operating system, right? The other thing that we are going to see is that apart from expectations about the future, another important component is going to be the past history, right? So this is going to be important for consumers in the sense that past adoptions made by others are going to be kind of like an important feature which will determine what are going to be the future adoptions of this product. And for the firm perspective, we'll see that past market share is going to be a very valuable asset whenever you are talking about this information type of economy, right? So these are several things that we kind of wish to explore, and we'll explore this through means of models where we'll see that you'll have some element of game theory and some elements of economics playing out.